Welcome to the Farm Family Harmony podcast. I'm Elaine Fraze, Farm Family Coach, here with another episode full of transition tips, tactics, and sometimes hard truths to get harmony on your farm. And welcome to another edition of the Farm Family Harmony podcast. And it's my joy and pleasure today to have a conversation with a longtime friend and colleague, Terry Betker from Backswath Management. And Terry, I think it would be interesting for our listeners today to just hear where you came from and where you're at today. So do you want to start there? Who is Terry Betker?
Well, I'd be happy to talk about that. And first, Elaine, thanks for providing me with this opportunity. We're going to talk about farms and transition, and that's something that I know is very dear to you, and that's important to me as well. So, firstly, thank you very much. I'm from Western Manitoba, farmed in Western Manitoba, and then how I got started in consulting. My wife Claire to take her master's in nursing in Calgary. Mm-hmm. So in 89 and 90, we moved our family out to Alberta. I farmed and went out there when the harvest was done, and I got a job with Alberta Agriculture. That time, Alberta Agriculture had a program that farmers could access where the government, the provincial government, made consultants available to them at no cost. So over 2 years out there, I had the pleasure of working with, I think, about 12 farm families in a whole bunch of different discussions. And that's 33 years ago. That's quite some time ago. But Elaine, I can absolutely remember where I was, and I'm not exaggerating this. I was driving back from a farmer's meeting, and I decided that I was going to become a farm business management consultant. And so in 1992, that's what I did. And, it's kind of unheard of.
Same year we bought the farm. So the year that Wes and I bought the farm in June 16th, 1992, that's the year you started your farm management practice.
Yep. And it's been either uphill or downhill ever since. So that's where I got to start. But, Elaine, back then, we farm families, the work we did was heavily oriented towards finance. There wasn't really anything like succession planning or transition planning. That a lot of what farms and farm families work with now around transition and management and stuff really wasn't that top of mind way back when. Over time, it's evolved.
And so we're talking a little bit today, Terry, about the fairness issue and also your experience in getting people to the table, because what I've always admired about you is your strategic planning, and also the fact you have a voice with the columns that you've been putting out in the Western Producer, which I think is a pretty favorite paper of a lot of farm families. So what's the difference now? I have a saying, one of my Elaine phrase that pays is, that was then. In 1992, when we bought quarters of land, they were $67,000. Now, in 2023, when my son is trying to pay off land that he bought from our neighbor who went through a divorce, that quarter was $440,000. So, is it the dollar signs on the balance sheet that are making things different? Like, what's the hugest barrier that you're seeing to getting people to the table to talk now?
To talk specifically about transition planning or just business in general? Transition
planning? I would say both, because the young farmers that come up to me, they say, Elaine, I can't get anybody to the table to talk about anything.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the most, as you know, there are lots of different reasons. It'll be very specific to the individuals and to the farm families. But I think in general, a lot of them really don't know what to do first. They don't know what the first step is,
right?
And their point of contact is, and I say this with respect, their point of contact is more typically their accountants and their lawyers. And what you and I are talking about, and what I think a lot of the farm families struggle with, are the matters that circle what the accountants talk to them about and what the lawyers talk to them about. And I think that then becomes relevant to different opportunities and challenges they face from a farm business management perspective, but then more acutely when we're contemplating transition. Well, I think those are challenges they have to get past. I think a lot of them have sensitivity around how to deal with some of the human and dynamics that apply it at this. And the last thing, I think there's so much change going on. I think it's difficult for them to grasp what does that mean and what do we do with it.
So Terry, one of the things that a farmer typically will say to me, Elaine, I only have one shot at this and I can't make any mistakes. I have to get it right the first time. So what's your comeback line, Terry? How are you getting folks to come to the table? What makes you different at Backswath and the processes that you use?
Well, what I thought about that a little bit, and it starts with a conversation. It'll be the same approach you take, Elaine. We start with a conversation, and we don't talk to them about or engage them in that first conversation about transition or transition planning. We engage them in a discussion, or we try to engage them in a discussion about what about their future,
right.
what do they see in their future, and how do the individuals in the family view the future, and what things might look like on the farm at some point in the time, 10 years, whatever. Pick some point in time into the future, and then if in that future there's a transition of ownership and management, then I think at least I think this is how we gain traction. Is we first get them to understand or tell us is what they understand transition to be.
Yeah, and define it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, define it, because there's a broad understanding. For some people, it's narrowly focused around minimizing tax, and others it's a broad discussion. So if we just start in talking about this is how you should do it, we might miss what their needs are, or what they're struggling with by a country mile, so to speak. So that's how we start.
So Terry, I've recommended to many a young farmer to sit down and write a letter to their parents as to what they want the future to look like, and put it in writing, print it off, deliver it, so that the family members, the founders, might have more time to process it. So what are the tools or tweaks that you use to help spur on better communication to the two generations? What happens when you get the young farmer saying, we need to get Backswath in here, we need facilitation, we need strategic planning? They're in your peer group or something, and they know what other farms are doing to be successful, and they feel like they're being left behind. So how do you get everybody to the table?
Your strategy or your tactic of getting the younger generation to write down what they understand that future to be is really powerful, because that, as you know, it's just a way different to write something down than to speak it.
Right.
And if you because writing something down requires a different level of thought or understanding than just speaking it. And I've had people tell me that, because we ask the families in the processes that we work with them through the development and the implementation of that transition plan to work through activities that require them to write things down, which what I just said and what you said, it gets them to gain a different understanding. The other benefit to that is, and exactly you're correct, is that if you write something down and share it, then somebody else reads it. And what we read is different than what we hear. So it's a very effective way to bring the people together and try to get to some common ground. And what is it that we're working towards, and what do we have to understand? And then I've come over time to just all the time gain I think more of an awareness of the importance of alignment. We talk a lot about alignment. So alignment within what their futures are, alignment on how they're going to deal with the transition of management, which is just a tricky area, financial alignment, but alignment is so key because well, if everybody was 100% perfectly aligned, the process would be a lot easier.
Right. You wouldn't have the pushback.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's just not real. I mean, we're humans, right? So there isn't 100% perfect alignment all the time. How do we deal with that?
So my curiosity with you is have said many times that procrastination and conflict avoidance is killing agriculture. And you've given a lot back to the profession, Terry, with your involvement with Farm Management Canada and farm risk programs and things. So how do we overcome that pushback or that procrastination?
Well, we
keep people accountable. Like you have a process. I've seen your strategic plans and your maps. You have a process for keeping people moving forward and doing what they said they will do. So I guess another way of asking that question, and listeners would like to know, is how the heck do you keep people accountable to get the work done, to not just have this piece of paper or this transition plan sitting on a shelf somewhere? Because to me, it's not a piece of paper. To me, it's a journey. And you, as the farm management specialist, want the people to execute what they said they're in alignment with.
Yeah. Your last comment there about a binder on a shelf, we don't give that. We don't have a 40 or 50 page binder that we hand out to the farmer and say, here's your transition plan. I just don't think that makes any sense at all, to be quite honest with you. Elaine, I use this story because it's true, but I got a call from a farm family in Saskatchewan, and they wanted me to come by and talk about transition planning for them. And meeting was going to be on a Friday, and that was all cool. On a Monday, the father sent me two documents. One was a 70-page report from their investment and insurance company, and the other one was a 40-page report from their accountant. So I never met this family before. Oh, you go in and you sit down and we have coffee and visit for a bit and, start to create or take the first steps in creating a relationship. And I remember turning to this, well, the farmer said to me, he said, well, something about transition planning. And I said to him, I said, well, I'm not clear exactly what you need from me. You gave me two documents that are way better developed than I think a lot of farmer families have in terms of their transition plan. And he answered right back. He says, because we don't know what to do first. And it's the applied discussion.
Yes, it's the practicalness.
Exactly. And so that's how we keep them engaged. And are we successful all the time? No. It's difficult over a number of years to keep a family equally engaged all the time. But we use process. So we get first understanding with the family about what we're doing in step one, what we're doing in step two, and we don't get ahead of ourselves.
Right.
We do step one, we do step two, and at the end of each step, here's what we need to do next. Are we still in agreement? And if they're in agreement, then, well, here's the 2 or 3 things that we're going to ask you to think about. And they build, and they end up with a series of resources that the farm can apply to the transition of ownership and management in their business.
Well, that's how we right. And I call that process an unfolding, Terry. They're getting clarity of expectations from the get-go. They're having a vision of what the future looks like. They're in alignment because what they value is the same. And I think, you and I are both aging, and I have a succession plan even for my coaching practice that I'm not going to be doing this in my 80s, but we need to pay attention to more than just the tax efficiency strategy that you mentioned too. And another confusing point. So the first point you made is, Elaine, they don't know where to get started. I agree. And that's why I've asked you today into this space, Terry, because I think you have a very strong skill of developing a relationship quickly and being practical. And asking and not coming into the family situation with a pre-described or presupposing what the outcomes need to be, because you have to tailor everything to the unique needs of that particular farm family, correct?
100%.
So go ahead.
Yeah. The other thing that in that is, I think, quite important is often I come across an expectation that they're going to be able to do this fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes time. And I think some families find that time to be at first troubling, but it's actually can be an asset, because as you start in that iterative step-by-step process, the family starts actively working through what they understand the transition to be. Over time, they gain a different understanding of what that means, something that they can't predetermine at step one what that's going to look like. So I think that process helps along the way.
Well, and I think you're also helping them to ask better questions, Terry, right? Because you are being practical. And one of the practical tips that I like to give our listeners in the time that we're together today is this question about financial transparency in fairness and the whole fairness discussion. So you're working with a successor, you're working with the parents, and the successor says, Terry, I can't afford to pay my parents more than $2 million.
Yeah.
And so how do you come to that understanding?
How does the family come to that understanding?
Both sides. Yeah, both sides. Because the parents, I often use the example that Merle Good put forward. A lot of farm assets and personal wealth is on the farm side of the ledger. And when we go to the personal wealth side, it's lacking many times. And so many farmers listening to this have parents who are expecting their retirement income or their income while they're stepping back without stepping away from the farm to come somehow from an income stream from the farm. And your specialty is the numbers and benchmarking and peer support and all those good things, and really knowing what your ratios mean. I mean, that's totally not my realm. That's your realm. So how do you use these practical tools and things that you know to be true, Terry? How do you help the parents come to understanding and the young farmers come to understanding this is a reasonable expectation for a buyout? This is not a reasonable expectation. That's a huge piece of fairness, I think.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And one of the first things we try to do is to help them to understand or get comfortable with the fact that it's okay not to know where things are at financially.
Okay.
Because they all get financial statements, they all file tax returns, they go to lenders, but the great majority of them aren't able to talk about what their financial strengths and weaknesses are. So we first want to say, hey, it's okay. We got to start someplace. And we need then to capture some of that historic, past financial performance to gain an understanding of this is what happened. Decisions were made along the way, and we've arrived where we are today, what our balance sheet looks like today. And it's going to be different going forward because now we have the next generation involved, and a generation moving out of the farm, exiting, I guess, if you will. And we have to try to understand what the financial consequences are of those future decisions. So the way we get at that is we model scenarios, and the what if, yeah, the modeling for the retiring people is different than what the modeling for the ongoing generation is. And then through that discussion, we can help to understand what their concerns are, talk about what their financial strengths are. If there's financial weaknesses, help them to understand, well, first off, it's okay, because I've never seen a farm with a perfect set of financial statements in my whole life.
Ever.
Doesn't
3 years.
exist. So, hey, what's good in your world financially, and what could be better in your world financially? Let's understand that, and then let's try to understand what that in turn means to transition. it's step by step. It
Well,
starts with
another sweet tool in your toolbox is your software that can run those scenarios.
yeah, that it works really well. We built it for purposes of what we're talking about. Farmcaster software is what it's known as now, and it captures historical information. The farmer can use the software, or we use the software, and it calculates the different ratios, and then you can go into the program and, well, what if we do this? Well, that's just for example. If the parents want to take $500,000 out of the business to buy a retirement home or a cottage,
Mm-hmm.
what's that going to do to the working capital of a farm or its debt servicing if they have to borrow the money? We can distill those decisions down to numbers, and then with that, help the family to understand what they mean.
Yeah, and that again is, I think farmers really love practicality, as you said before, and they want to have tools that help give them more certainty for what the future may or may not look like. So just as we spend a few more minutes here, my curiosity is also around how you do family meetings, Terry. What needs to happen in a good meeting to make it a successful exchange of information and communication?
Well, I still love the in-person meetings.
You're not a big fan of Zoom. Come on.
Yeah, I know. Well, we've got pretty good at Zoom and Teams and stuff, and it can be pretty effective. But I still like the in-person
Yes.
discussions. But Elaine, we need an agenda, and so the people need to know in advance what we're going to talk about. I believe that agenda needs to include steps within the transition process. So it's nothing out of nothing in a meeting should come as a surprise.
Okay, and people could prepare for the meeting.
People can prepare for the meetings. Something that you're I'm sure, really, really good at is in those meetings. Then we may end up in some discussions that have some emotion attached to it, and having a third party such as you or Backswath team members involved help to make those discussions perhaps a little easier. We try
Safe
to
and respectful.
Respectful, calm the discussion, create some outcomes, ask questions to cause people to think, so they're not just listening to respond. So it's the art of, in a meeting, effective facilitation, to make sure everybody has a chance to speak and everybody gets heard, and there's no judgment being passed on people.
Right. And not prejudging the outcome either, Terry, because I remember a mediation. I've used this sometimes when I'm speaking, where this young man had an $80,000 debt and he couldn't figure out how he was going to satisfy his creditors. And we went out and we had a coffee break, and he came back and he says, all excited. He said, Elaine, I figured it out. I'm going to sell that bush quarter that's right next to the park where people like to hunt, and I'm going to sell it to some American hunters, get the 80 grand, solve off my debt, and then pay better attention going forward with how I negotiate my debt servicing. So again, this is another conflict resolution skill that I want people to really let sink in, is put yourself in the other person's shoes. What does it feel like to be you? What does it feel like to be dad or mom or whoever's in the room? But the other thing is, come with a sense of curiosity, not to prejudge the outcome, but also sit there and create solutions. But I kind of smiled when you talked about an agenda, because I have a husband who's very ambitious, determined, and uses very few words. So part of that facilitation is helping draw out more understanding from people who don't use a lot of words, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sometimes if I sense, Elaine, in a family discussion that agenda is too formal, then I'll just call it discussion points. Try to soften it a little bit. We'll often have individual meetings, so sometimes there are sensitive matters that just people aren't able to bring them up in a total family discussion. So we'll have individual meetings. We've got to unpack what's causing them the challenges, what the obstacles are.
Yeah, where the resistance, and I think the respect and confidentiality there too, Terry, comes is as the farm management specialist, you get to sit in that meeting and you know exactly what everybody in that family circle is thinking because you've had those individual conversations. And then you as the facilitator have the power to ask and say, Charlie, would you like to tell your dad about your hesitancy in going down this direction? So you've prompted Charlie to speak, but he has to speak it. You're not going to speak it for him.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And Charlie's already spoken to me first. So he's already uploaded it once.
And he's already practiced with you. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And I think that's the anxiety and the overwhelm for families who don't have quite yet the conflict management language that I want them to have. And so my desire is also to manage risk of things blowing apart by helping families have better language to really ask for what they need and express what they need. So of all the things that we've talked about today, Terry, what's the one thing that you would like farm people, older farmers or the ones coming to be the next generation, what's the one sweet skill that you'd like them to embrace or test out so that they can get this transition journey started?
It would be this transition planning now is different than it was generations past, but they need to start now because the transition discussions for the next generation 20 years from now are going to be way more complex. So the families need to start now, and then they need to incorporate transition just as good business management practices in an ongoing basis. There, it's not we're going to do it now in 2023 and we don't have to do that again.
Right, and check it off the list. It's never checked off. No, I say it's not Roundup. It's not a 10-day solution, right? And that's a really good point to land on. I have a dairy family I worked with in BC. The first Wednesday of the month between 9 and 11 was always the operational meeting. How are we going to operate this dairy farm better? And this third Wednesday of the month between 9 and 11 in the morning after milking was done was always the strategic meeting as to how's everybody doing? Are we moving it forward? Are we growing? And all those good things. So Terry, if folks want to find you, how do they find you?
Well, it's Terry Betker at Backswath.com. Go to our Backswath website. It's just that, backswath.com. They can call me, text me at 204-782-8200. I'll respond to the text.
And you'll pick up the phone.
I will pick up the phone. Yeah, I'll pick up the phone for sure.
No.
But that's be happy to talk to anybody. And Elaine, I appreciate the opportunity, as I said, to talk to you about this today. But if someone's listening and they just have a simple question, ask me. We don't have to embark on 7 meetings. Just ask me a question. I get farmers call me. I'm sure you do too, and it's just a kind of like a on their mind question. Happy to talk anytime.
Right, and I think we've been doing this for so many decades, Terry. Is that we know the work is never done because there's so many people that are anxious and overwhelmed. And it's one conversation at a time to end that, right?
Yeah, it is. We've got a great team at Backswath. There's 16 of us. We're across Western Canada. So if people are listening in another province and I see them far away in Winnipeg, hey, maybe we get closer to them. So,
and we can do great work together too, because we're all working for the same thing. For farm families to be successful and to have more harmony through understanding. And I also remind people listening, if you like The Western Producer and you haven't read it lately, go and seek out Terry's columns when they land there too. So there's lots of great places to have resources. So reach out to farmfamilycoach.com on Facebook or Twitter or TikTok, and also reach out to Terry with those farm business management questions. Remember, it's your farm, it's your family, and it's your choice. So work hard to make good choices to have more harmony. Are you feeling stuck with your farm family transition? I'm here to help. Simply go to www.alainefraise.com/membership to find out more how you can create and get actionable tools to help your farm family move forward. And Fraise is spelled F-R-O-E-S-E. www.alainefraise.com/membership. See you soon.